Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the less glamorous, more grisly side of pirate life. Forget the rum-soaked songs and the dashing sword fights for a moment. We're going to imagine, with chilling clarity, exactly how you'd terribly die as a pirate. Because let's be honest, while the idea of a life at sea, free from the king's law, sounds thrilling on paper, the reality was a brutal, short-lived existence where survival was less about skill and more about sheer, terrifying luck. This isn't a story of glorious battles or buried treasure. It's a whisper of the cold, hard facts, the ones that rarely make it into the movies. You'll quickly realize that you probably wouldn't have lasted a week out there. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy, maybe let me know your location and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the creaking wooden deck, the salt spray already clinging to your rough, ill-fitting clothes. The air is thick with the scent of tar, stale sweat, and something vaguely fishy that you can't quite place. This isn't the grand pirate ship of your dreams. Mind you, this is a converted merchant vessel, hastily armed, its sails patched and worn, groaning under the strain of the relentless ocean. You've just signed on, or more likely, been press-ganged. Your dreams of adventure quickly evaporating under the harsh reality of this floating prison. The moment you stepped aboard, you stepped into a world designed to kill you, slowly or swiftly, often in ways far less dramatic than a cannonball to the chest. Consider, for a moment, the very act of getting to the ship. You've made your way to some grimy port town, a labyrinth of narrow, sewage-filled alleys. The air is thick with the stench of human waste, rotting fish, and cheap liquor. You navigate through crowds of desperate souls, pickpockets, and the occasional brawling sailor. Perhaps you've spent your last copper on a watered-down ale in a dimly lit tavern, hoping to find a berth. But even before you set foot on deck, the environment itself is a predator. You could stumble into a drunken brawl, a broken bottle to the head ending your pirating career before it even truly begins. Or perhaps you contract one of the myriad diseases that fester in these overcrowded, unsanitary urban cesspools: dysentery, typhoid, smallpox. These aren't just historical footnotes. They are very real, very lethal threats that lurk in every handshake, every shared cup, every breath of fetid air. Imagine the chills, the fever, the relentless vomiting, all before you've even seen the open sea. You'd be lying in a filthy cot, surrounded by strangers, perhaps on a street corner, your grand dreams of adventure dissolving into a miserable, lonely death, far from home and utterly unmourned. But let's assume you make it past the port's deadly embrace. You're on board now, the ship a-rolling, pitching world of its own. The first thing that strikes you is the sheer lack of space. Hammocks are slung so close together you can smell your neighbor's unwashed hair. The ship is a microcosm of humanity at its grittiest, and personal hygiene is a luxury few can afford. You quickly learn to navigate the deck, a treacherous landscape of ropes, barrels, and the ever-present threat of a sudden lurch. The ship isn't a stable platform. It's a living, breathing entity, constantly shifting beneath your feet. One wrong step, one moment of distraction, and you could easily find yourself tumbling overboard. The cold embrace of the ocean is immediate, shocking. You thrash, gasping, the weight of your sodden clothes dragging you down. The ship, meanwhile, sails onward, a tiny speck against the vast horizon. Even if your cries are heard, turning the ship around takes precious time, and by then, the currents might have pulled you under, or the sheer exhaustion overwhelms you. You swallow a mouthful of seawater. It burns. Your lungs scream. And then, The world goes black. A silent, unceremonious end. Swallowed by the indifferent sea. Historians still debate whether more pirates died by drowning than by combat. A testament to the sea's relentless power. Even if you avoid the immediate perils of falling overboard, the general living conditions are a slow, grinding torture. Food is scarce and monotonous hardtack. Salted meat, and whatever fresh provisions can be plundered or traded. The water, stored in wooden barrels, quickly becomes stagnant, slimy with algae, and teeming with unseen bacteria. Every sip is a gamble, a potential gateway for stomach-churning illnesses that will leave you weak, dehydrated, and utterly miserable. You're constantly hungry, constantly thirsty, your body slowly wasting away. The lack of fresh fruit and vegetables means scurvy is an ever-present, terrifying threat. We'll delve into scurvy in more detail later, but for now, just imagine the dull ache that begins in your joints, the exhaustion that never lifts, the gums that swell and bleed, your teeth loosening in their sockets. It's a disease that slowly disassembles you, piece by agonizing piece. You watch as your shipmates succumb, their bodies growing weaker, their faces hollow, and you know, with a chilling certainty, that you might be next. The work itself is backbreaking and relentless. You haul ropes, swab decks, mend sails, always under the watchful, often cruel, eye of the boatswain or quartermaster. There's no downtime, no true rest. When the winds pick up, you're scrambling up the rigging, hundreds of feet above the deck, the canvas flapping wildly, threatening to rip you from your precarious perch. The ropes chafe your hands, leaving them raw and bleeding. The sun, when it appears, bakes down on you, raising blisters on your exposed skin. And when it rains, you are soaked to the bone, shivering in your threadbare clothes, the cold seeping into your very bones. There's no escape from the elements. The ship is your entire world, and it offers little comfort. The constant exposure to the sun, wind, and salt water leaves your skin cracked and peeling, your eyes red-rimmed and perpetually tired. You're always on edge, always aware of the next chore, the next threat, the next wave that could wash you clean off the deck. And then there's the constant threat of injury. The ship is a dangerous place. Heavy rigging could snap and whip across the deck, breaking bones or crushing skulls. A poorly secured cannon could break loose in a storm, rolling across the deck and crushing anything in its path. Imagine the sickening crack of bone, the searing pain, the immediate onset of shock. There's no doctor on board. Not really. Perhaps a surgeon who is little more than a barber with a saw and a rudimentary understanding of anatomy. An open wound on a ship, in that era, is practically a death sentence. Infection sets in quickly. The wound festering, turning black, the smell of putrefaction filling the cramped quarters. You'd lie there, feverish, delirious, your body battling a losing fight against the unseen armies of bacteria. Amputation, often performed without anesthetic, might be your only chance. A crude, brutal procedure that often led to further infection and a slow, agonizing end anyway. The screams of a man undergoing such a procedure would haunt the dreams of every crew member, a constant reminder of their own precarious existence. The simple fact is, the average life expectancy of a pirate was incredibly short. It wasn't the romantic ideal of a long, adventurous life. It was a desperate gamble against overwhelming odds. The sea itself, with its storms and its boundless depths, was a formidable adversary. The harsh living conditions, the constant threat of disease, the violence inherent in their chosen profession, all conspired to ensure that very few pirates lived to a ripe old age. A common historical fact often overlooked in popular culture is the astonishing rate of attrition among pirate crews. far more dying from disease and accidents than from naval battles. And it's this relentless, mundane grind of danger and deprivation that truly makes the pirate life a terrifying prospect. There's an interesting academic debate among historians about whether the allure of quick riches outweighed the almost certain statistical probability of a painful death. Most agree, it likely did not. For those who truly understood the risks, you, standing there on that swaying deck, feeling the bite of the wind and the dampness of the air, would quickly come to understand it too. Every day is a struggle. Every night a brief, restless reprieve from the endless peril. This is your new reality. And it's far from the swashbuckling tales you might have heard. You've survived the initial horrors of the port and the immediate dangers of getting underway. But the sea has 1,000 more ways to claim you. And one of the most insidious, the most drawn out, and arguably the most terrifying, is scurvy. It's not a sudden, dramatic end like a cannonball, but a slow, relentless decay, turning your own body into your enemy. Imagine, if you will, the dull ache that begins to set in. It's not just fatigue from endless days of hauling ropes and swabbing decks. It's a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that no amount of sleep can alleviate. You feel it in your joints first, a stiffness that makes every movement a chore. Then, the pain starts. A throbbing discomfort in your knees, your ankles, spreading through your limbs. This isn't just sore muscles, it's your body beginning to break down from the inside out. The culprit, a seemingly innocent lack of vitamin C, was a mystery to most in the 17th and 18th centuries. They might have called it the plague of the sea or the sailor's bane, attributing it to everything from bad air to laziness. But for you, the victim, it's a living nightmare. You try to hide it at first. The shame of weakness, the fear of being seen as unfit for duty. But scurvy is a master of unveiling. Your gums begin to swell, becoming soft and spongy, a dark, purplish hue. Then, they start to bleed. Not just a little, but freely. A constant metallic taste in your mouth. You try to eat, but chewing becomes an agonizing ordeal. Your teeth, once firmly rooted, begin to loosen, wiggling in their sockets. One by one, they might even fall out, leaving you with a gaping, painful maw, making the already unappetizing hardtack impossible to consume. The hunger, previously a dull ache, now becomes a gnawing agony as your body starves for nutrients it cannot extract. The exhaustion deepens, pulling you down into a perpetual lethargy. You find yourself struggling to climb the rigging, your muscles weak and unresponsive. Your shipmates, noticing your decline, might offer a sympathetic glance or a gruff word of encouragement. But there's little they can do. They've seen it before. They know where it leads. The once robust sinews of your muscles start to contract, pulling your limbs into unnatural, painful positions. Your knees might bend permanently, your arms stiffen at your sides. You become a contorted shadow of your former self, unable to fully straighten your body, unable to find comfort in any position. Imagine the constant, excruciating cramp, the feeling of your own flesh slowly turning against you. Then come the skin manifestations, a gruesome tapestry of the disease's progression. Your skin becomes rough, dry, and scaly. Old scars, long healed, might mysteriously reopen, weeping blood and pus. New wounds appear with terrifying ease, often without you even noticing how they occurred. The slightest bump or scrape turns into a painful, non-healing ulcer. But the most distinctive, and perhaps most disturbing, visual sign is the emergence of purple, bruised spots on your skin, particularly on your legs. These aren't just normal bruises. These are subcutaneous hemorrhages, where blood vessels beneath your skin rupture, creating large discolored patches. These spots can coalesce, turning large areas of your body a mottled, sickly purple, a horrifying roadmap of your internal bleeding. It's a vivid, silent scream from your body that it is failing. Internally, the damage is even more profound. Your internal organs are struggling. Hemorrhages can occur in your muscles, your joints, even around your brain. This internal bleeding leads to agonizing pain, swelling, and further dysfunction. You might suffer from internal bleeding in your digestive tract, leading to bloody stools and a further weakening of your already compromised system. Your heart, deprived of essential nutrients, begins to weaken, struggling to pump blood through your damaged vessels. You feel a constant pounding in your chest, a desperate, irregular rhythm. The slightest exertion leaves you breathless, your lungs burning. A classic example of scurvy's devastation is often cited in the voyages of early explorers. Vasco da Gama, on his pioneering journey to India, lost over half his crew to scurvy. Later, Captain Cook, a meticulous observer, famously eradicated scurvy from his ships by insisting on a diet rich in sauerkraut and citrus, a testament to the power of simple, yet then unknown, dietary interventions. However, for you, a common pirate, such knowledge is a luxury. Your captain, if he cares at all, might offer you a swig of vinegar or a sip of beer, mistakenly believing these crude remedies will help. They don't. The lack of personal hygiene on a ship exacerbates your suffering. You are surrounded by filth, by the unwashed bodies of your shipmates, by the pervasive smell of sickness. The open sores on your body become breeding grounds for infection, adding another layer of agony to your already unbearable condition. The ship's rats, bold and ever-present, might scuttle across your hammock at night, a grim reminder of the squalor in which you are dying. As the disease progresses, your mind might begin to wander. The pain, the hunger, the constant awareness of your rotting body all contribute to a state of delirium. You might hallucinate, seeing strange shapes in the shadows, hearing voices that aren't there. Your shipmates, observing your increasing madness, will give you a wide berth, fearing contagion or simply uncomfortable with the sight of a man so utterly broken. You become isolated, even amongst the crowded quarters of the ship, a pariah in your own suffering. The final stages are a slow descent into unconsciousness. Your heart, too weak to continue, falters. Your breathing becomes shallow, ragged. Your eyes, once bright with the faint spark of adventure, now dull and glazed over. You might drift in and out of awareness, the sounds of the ship, the creak of the timbers, the lapping of the waves fading into a distant hum. Finally, mercifully, your body gives out. No dramatic last stand, no heroic sacrifice, just a quiet, whimpering fade. Your life extinguished by a simple, invisible deficiency. Your death is not celebrated, not mourned with any great ceremony. Your body, shrunken and contorted, will be wrapped in a sailcloth, a heavy shot perhaps tied to your feet, and then, with a brief prayer, or none at all, you are slid over the side, returning to the vast, uncaring ocean that brought you so much misery. Your unmarked grave is the entire world's ocean. Your epitaph, the silence of the waves. The academic debate continues about whether the psychological toll of scurvy, the slow madness it inflicted, was as terrifying as the physical disintegration. Either way, it was a truly terrible way to die. You've somehow, miraculously, managed to evade the creeping decay of scurvy, perhaps by some stroke of pure luck. Or maybe your pirate captain was one of the rare few who understood the value of a lime. But the ocean itself remains your greatest, most indifferent adversary. The briny deep's embrace is a constant, terrifying possibility, a cold, dark fate that can claim you in 100 different ways, often without warning, and usually with no chance of recovery. Imagine the ship cutting through the waves, a thin wooden shell separating you from an unimaginable abyss. you're never truly safe. The deck is always slick with spray, the ropes treacherous underfoot. A sudden lurch, a misstep while hauling on a sheet, and your world tilts. Your foot slips, your grip fails, and in that horrifying instant, you're airborne, flailing, the screams of your shipmates swallowed by the wind. The impact with the water is a jarring, teeth-rattling shock, instantly stealing your breath. The cold is immediate, a numbing embrace that sends a jolt through your entire system. You gasp, but instead of air, you suck in a mouthful of salty, bitter seawater. It burns your throat, your lungs scream in protest. You thrash, arms flailing, desperately trying to keep your head above the churning surface. The weight of your clothes, now sodden and heavy, drags you down like lead weights. Your boots, designed for traction on deck, become waterlogged anchors pulling you deeper. You kick, you claw, you fight against the invisible forces pulling you under. But the ship, your only hope, is already pulling away. It's a cruel irony, a vessel designed to carry you across the vastness now carries you away from your last chance. Even if your cries are heard, turning a square-rigged sailing ship around is a slow, laborious process. It requires precious minutes to halt its momentum, furl sails, and swing the rudder. By the time they could theoretically reach you, you might already be miles astern. Or worse, have succumbed to the cold. The ocean, you quickly learn, is not just water. It is a living, breathing entity with its own predatory inhabitants. Even if you manage to stay afloat, the thought of what lurks beneath is enough to chill you to the bone. Sharks, drawn by the scent of the ship's refuse or the commotion of a man overboard, are a very real threat. You might feel a brush against your leg, a silent, swift movement in the murky depths, and then a searing pain, or perhaps the more drawn-out terror of seeing a dark shape circling, observing, before it makes its move. The agony of a shark attack, the feeling of your flesh being torn, is a terrifying way to go. Your blood blooming in the water, a grim advertisement for your end. A popular historical belief, often cited but debated by historians, suggests that a significant number of pirate and sailor deaths at sea were due to shark attacks, though concrete evidence is scarce. But sharks are just one of the ocean's many instruments of death. Hypothermia is a silent killer, creeping up on you as the cold water systematically drains the warmth from your body. Your muscles cramp, first in your legs, then your arms, making it impossible to swim. Your mind, too, begins to shut down. Confusion sets in. Then a strange sense of calm. A deceptive warmth as your core body temperature drops dangerously low. You stop fighting. Your limbs grow heavy. And you slowly, almost peacefully, slip beneath the surface. Your last breath, a string of bubbles ascending to an indifferent sky. Then there are the storms. Oh, the storms. You might have seen squalls on land, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the terrifying power of a full-blown ocean tempest. The sky darkens with unnatural speed, turning a bruised, violent purple. The wind howls, a banshee's shriek tearing through the rigging, threatening to rip the sails to shreds. The ship, which once seemed so sturdy, becomes a toy tossed about on a monstrous, boiling cauldron. Waves rise like liquid mountains, towering over the mast, threatening to engulf you whole. You cling to whatever you can, your knuckles white, your body slammed against the deck with every violent lurch. The roar of the wind, the crash of the waves, the groaning of the timbers, it's a symphony of chaos. A visceral reminder of your utter insignificance against the raw power of nature. In such a storm, death can come in a multitude of swift, brutal forms. A rogue wave, taller and more powerful than the rest, could sweep over the deck, washing you overboard in an instant. Or perhaps a sudden, violent roll sends you hurtling across the deck, your head striking a mast or a cannon, ending your life with a sickening crunch. The ship itself might succumb, its timbers groaning and splitting under the relentless assault. You'd feel the deck buckle beneath your feet. Hear the ominous tearing sounds as the hull gives way. Water would rush in, cold and dark, swallowing everything in its path. You might be trapped below decks, drowning in the rising tide, or sucked into the vortex of a sinking ship, pulled down into the crushing depths, the chaos, the fear, the certainty of doom. It's an absolute nightmare. Even if the ship somehow weathers the storm, you might be left adrift. The mast could snap, leaving the ship a helpless hulk, at the mercy of the currents. Or perhaps the ship strikes a submerged reef or rock, tearing open its belly with a screech of tortured wood. You might find yourself clinging to a piece of wreckage, bobbing in the vast expanse, miles from any land, under a scorching sun or a freezing night sky. Thirst would become your new tormentor, the salt water mocking your parched lips. Delirium would set in, your mind conjuring mirages of rescue or fresh water. Your skin would blister and peel from the sun. Your throat would close up. And eventually, exhaustion and dehydration would claim you, a slow, agonizing end under an indifferent sky. The common historical fact is that more ships were lost to storms and accidents at sea than to direct combat with other vessels. The sheer unpredictability of the ocean is what makes it so terrifying. You could be enjoying a calm, sunny day, the waves gently lapping against the hull, when a sudden squall whips up, catching the ship unprepared. Or perhaps you're simply working, absorbed in your task, when a loose rope or a shifting barrel sends you tumbling. There's no escaping its reach, no hiding from its power. It is a constant, omnipresent threat, waiting for the slightest mistake, the smallest lapse in vigilance, to claim another victim. You are always, always at its mercy. This relentless sense of peril, the understanding that at any moment the sea could decide your fate, adds an enormous psychological burden to the already brutal physical demands of pirate life. You learn to live with a knot of anxiety in your stomach, a quiet dread that shadows every waking moment, knowing that your next breath might be your last, and that it will be the ocean that takes it. You've dodged scurvy, outwitted the hungry depths of the ocean, and miraculously, your ship hasn't been swallowed by a tempest. Good for you. But now, you face the very thing that probably drew you to piracy in the first place, or at least the thing that defines it in the public imagination: combat. And let me tell you, pirate combat isn't the graceful, choreographed ballet of blades you've seen in films. It's a brutal, chaotic, and utterly terrifying lottery where death is swift, indiscriminate, and often incredibly messy. This is where the glamour dissolves into a visceral, blood-soaked nightmare. Imagine the tension building as a sail is spotted on the horizon. Is it prey, or is it predator? The air crackles with a mixture of anticipation and raw fear. The captain bellows orders, the crew scrambles, and the ship is readied for engagement. Cannons are run out, cutlasses are drawn, muskets are primed. You feel the cold weight of your own weapon in your hand, perhaps a rusty cutlass that barely holds an edge, or a heavy, unreliable flintlock pistol. Your heart pounds a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a drumbeat of impending doom. The first volley of cannon fire is less of a precise attack and more of a jarring, concussive assault. The deck beneath your feet shudders violently with each roar of the guns. Wooden splinters explode from the hull, tearing through the air like deadly shrapnel, capable of impaling you or blinding you in an instant. The smell of sulfur and gunpowder fills your nostrils, thick and acrid, burning your throat. Cannonballs rip through the sails, shredding canvas, or plunge into the water with a terrifying splash, sending geysers of spray high into the air. A direct hit to the deck could send a cascade of wood fragments, iron, and even human remains flying, obliterating anyone unlucky enough to be in its path. You might find yourself standing next to a shipmate one moment, only to see him vanish in a gruesome puff of red mist the next. It's a shocking, disorienting start, designed to sow panic and chaos. Once the ships grapple and boarding commences, the true horror begins. There's no elegant dueling. It's a frantic, desperate melee, a swirling vortex of violence. You leap onto the enemy deck, perhaps slipping on a puddle of blood, your balance immediately compromised. The air is filled with the clang of steel on steel, the sharp crack of musket fire, the guttural screams of men in agony, and the terrifying animalistic roars of combatants. Visibility is poor, obscured by smoke from the guns and the frantic movement of bodies. You're trying to see, to react, but your senses are overwhelmed. A cutlass swing comes at you, a glint of steel, and you parry instinctively, the impact jarring your arm. The force of the blow could easily shatter your wrist or disarm you. You push back, thrusting your own crude blade forward. Your aim is less about skill and more about sheer desperation. A lunge might meet flesh, or it might glance off bone. The feeling of your blade striking an opponent is not glorious. It's a sickening thud, often accompanied by a spray of warm, sticky blood. You're not trying to wound, you're trying to kill, and quickly, before someone else kills you. This isn't a duel of honor. It's a chaotic fight for survival. Muskets, though slow to reload, are devastating at close range. The blast is deafening, the ball tearing through flesh with incredible force. You might hear the distinctive crack, then feel a searing pain as a lead ball tears through your arm or leg, shattering bone and muscle. The shock is immediate, followed by a blinding agony. You collapse. The battle raging around you, indifferent to your suffering. Or perhaps a musket ball finds a more vital spot, piercing your chest or your head. One moment you're fighting, the next, the world goes dark. There's no time for last words, no dramatic farewell, just an abrupt, unceremonious end. Beyond the immediate weapons, the environment itself is deadly. The decks are slick with blood, water, and the detritus of battle-broken barrels, loose ropes, discarded weapons. A slip could send you sprawling, leaving you vulnerable to a fatal blow. The confined space means there's no escape, no retreat. You are pressed in on all sides, fighting hand to hand, your life hanging by a thread with every swing of a blade, every thrust of a pike. The sheer claustrophobia of combat on a ship, the press of bodies, the lack of room to maneuver, significantly amplified the lethality. Even if you survive the initial boarding, the battle might still rage. Perhaps you suffer a grievous wound, a deep cut from a cutlass that severs an artery, or a pike thrust that pierces your side. The pain is intense, overwhelming. You might try to staunch the flow of blood with a dirty rag, but the wound continues to bleed, steadily draining your life force. You lean against a bulkhead, trying to stay conscious, watching the chaos unfold around you. Knowing that your time is short, infection, as we've discussed, is almost a certainty for any significant wound, promising a slow, agonizing death even if you survive the immediate battle. And then there's the psychological toll, the sheer brutality of it. Seeing your shipmates fall, hearing their screams, witnessing the casual savagery of men fighting for their lives. You might have seen death before, but this is different. This is a visceral, up-close encounter with humanity at its most primitive, most desperate. It leaves scars on the mind as well as the body. This unique psychological pressure, combined with the physical demands, is a facet of pirate life that historians increasingly acknowledge as a significant factor in mortality rates. Sometimes, death in combat isn't even intentional. You might be trampled in the crush of bodies, suffocated by the press of the fight, or perhaps caught in the crossfire between two of your own shipmates and an enemy, an accidental victim of friendly fire. It's a grim lottery, and the odds are never in your favor. There's a particular horror in dying not heroically, but as an anonymous casualty in the chaotic churn of battle. The aftermath, if you're still alive, is just as grim. The deck is littered with bodies, friend and foe alike, their eyes staring blankly at the sky. The moans of the wounded fill the air, a mournful chorus. You might be tasked with throwing the dead overboard, their bodies sinking into the depths. Another unmarked grave in the vast ocean. The ship, once a symbol of adventure, is now a slaughterhouse, soaked in blood, littered with broken timbers and the remnants of shattered lives. The lingering smell of death and gunpowder would cling to the air for days. A constant, sickening reminder of the terrible price of pirate combat. You survived this time, but the memory and the wounds will serve as a constant reminder that your luck can only last so long. You've stared down the brutal chaos of combat, and somehow, by sheer dumb luck, you're still breathing. But that doesn't mean you're out of the woods, not by a long shot. The next circle of hell for a pirate often involves the very thing meant to save you, the ship's surgeon. Or, more accurately, the individual masquerading as one. Because on a pirate ship, medicine was less about healing and more about a terrifying gamble, often making an injury worse than the initial wound itself. This is where a simple cut could lead to a drawn-out, excruciating end. Imagine you've taken the hit. Perhaps a glancing blow from a cutlass has opened a deep gash on your arm, or a splinter from a shattered mast has lodged itself painfully in your leg during a storm. The initial pain is searing, but the real terror sets in when you're brought to the surgeon's cramped, dimly lit quarters below deck. This isn't a clean, sterile operating theater. This is a space likely shared with rats, reeking of stale rum, unwashed bodies, and the cloying smell of decay. The surgeon himself is probably not a trained physician. More likely, he's a former barber, a butcher, or simply a man with a strong stomach and a minimal amount of practical experience gained from observing gruesome battlefield injuries. His tools, a terrifying collection of rusty saws, dull knives, and probes, probably all unsterilized and caked with dried blood from the last poor soul. Let's focus on the most common and terrifying procedure: amputation. Imagine you've suffered a compound fracture. Perhaps your leg shattered by a falling spar or mangled by a musket ball. The bone is exposed, the flesh torn. The surgeon takes one look and declares it must come off. There's no anesthesia, not as you know it. Your options are a swig of rum, a leather strap to bite on, or simply biting your tongue. The rum might dull the edges slightly, but it won't spare you the searing agony. You're held down by a few burly shipmates, their faces grim, perhaps pitying. You can feel the vibration of the saw against your bone, a bone-chilling rasping sound that echoes in your ears. The blade tears through flesh, muscle, and then grinds against bone. The pain is unimaginable. A white-hot agony that forces screams from your throat. Even with the leather strap clenched between your teeth, the blood gushes, soaking the crude bandages and the filthy deck beneath you. This procedure, simple in concept, was a terrifying ordeal of pure, unadulterated pain. But the amputation itself is only the beginning of your nightmare. The real killer, unseen and relentless, is infection. The surgeon, unaware of germ theory, might wipe his tools on a dirty rag or simply use them as they are, fresh from a previous operation. The stump of your limb, a gaping wound, is then dressed with whatever is at hand: unwashed bandages, perhaps even a poultice made from strange herbs, or even tar. Bacteria, unseen to the eye, swarm into the open wound. Within days, or even hours, the stump will begin to swell, becoming hot to the touch. The pain, which never truly receded, will intensify, becoming a throbbing, relentless agony. Pus, thick and foul-smelling, will seep from the wound. You'll feel a fever creep over you, your body trembling with chills. then burning with heat. This is sepsis setting in, your body's immune system being overwhelmed. You become delirious, drifting in and out of consciousness. The sounds of the ship, once so clear, become a muffled roar. Your shipmates, observing your decline, might give you a wide berth, fearing the unknown fever that consumes you. The smell of your rotting limb becomes almost unbearable, even to yourself. Gangrene might set in, the flesh turning black and putrid, the stench unmistakable. This is your body literally dying, one cell at a time. A common historical fact is that many more lives were lost to post-operative infection than to the actual surgical procedure itself, highlighting the primitive state of medicine at sea. Even for less severe injuries, the risks were enormous. A deep cut from a knife could become infected with tetanus, leading to agonizing muscle spasms, lockjaw, and eventual suffocation as your respiratory muscles seize up. Or perhaps a festering wound develops osteomyelitis, an infection of the bone itself, leading to chronic pain, fever, and a gradual, debilitating decay that would leave you a skeletal shadow of your former self. Any cut, any bruise, any abrasion had the potential to become a portal for deadly pathogens in that unsanitary environment. The lack of effective pain management meant that even minor procedures were a torment. Imagine having a broken bone reset or a deep splinter removed, all while fully conscious, feeling every single agonizing manipulation. The sheer psychological trauma of enduring such pain, knowing there's no escape, would leave indelible scars on your mind, even if your body somehow healed. Furthermore, medical knowledge was rudimentary at best. The surgeon might attempt bizarre and ineffective remedies for internal ailments, bleeding you with leeches or giving you purgatives that would further dehydrate and weaken your already struggling body. They might believe in the theory of humors, attempting to balance your internal fluids through practices that were more harmful than helpful. Historians still debate the efficacy of many common 18th century medical practices, with many concluding that the best medicine was often no medicine at all. Your death, should it come from a botched surgery or infection, would be a slow, drawn-out affair. You wouldn't die in a blaze of glory on a boarding party, but rather in a cramped, dark corner of the ship, your body racked with fever, your mind clouded by delirium. Your last days would be filled with pain, the smell of your own decay, and the chilling realization that the very attempt to save you led to your agonizing demise. No hero's burial, no grand final words, just a quiet, wretched end. Your body discarded into the indifferent waves. Another casualty not of battle, but of the primitive, brutal realities of maritime medicine. Remember that time you thought a small cut wasn't a big deal on a pirate ship? That cut would literally be a death sentence. You've somehow cheated death from scurvy, avoided the ocean's hungry grasp, survived a brutal boarding action, and even dodged the butcher surgeon's deadly ministrations. You're feeling pretty good about yourself, perhaps a bit smug, but on a pirate ship, the greatest threat might not come from an enemy vessel or the raging sea, but from the very men you sail with. This is where mutiny's sharp edge becomes terrifyingly real, a betrayal from within that can lead to a swift, brutal, and often unexpected end at the hands of your own shipmates. Imagine the simmering discontent. Perhaps the captain is a tyrant, brutalizing the crew with flogging for minor infractions. Or he's incompetent, leading the ship into dangerous waters or consistently failing to secure profitable prizes. Maybe he's hoarding the best of the plunder, leaving the crew with scraps, whatever the cause. Resentment brews like a slow-burning fire, fanned by whispers in the cramped, airless quarters below deck. You overhear hushed conversations, furtive glances exchanged, a growing sense of unease that hangs heavier in the air than the stale rum fumes. The beauty and terror of a pirate ship's democracy is its inherent instability. Unlike naval vessels with their rigid hierarchies, pirate captains were often elected by the crew and could be, and frequently were, deposed by them. This power dynamic, while seemingly fair, was a double-edged sword. It meant that a popular captain could lead with authority, but an unpopular one was constantly on the brink of being overthrown. And when that overthrow happened, it was rarely a polite resignation. The first sign might be subtle. A group of men congregating more often than usual, their voices low, their expressions grim. You might notice a hardened gaze from a quartermaster who suddenly seems too quiet, too observant. Perhaps a trusted bosun starts to openly question the captain's orders. The tension is palpable. A thick, suffocating blanket that settles over the ship. You find yourself walking on eggshells, unsure who to trust, knowing that aligning with the wrong faction could mean your doom. The academic debate among historians often revolves around whether these pirate democracies were truly revolutionary or simply a pragmatic system born of necessity. But their volatile nature is undisputed. Then comes the moment of truth. It might be during the dead of night, while the captain sleeps soundly in his cabin, unaware of the rebellion festering just outside his door. Or perhaps it's a sudden, brazen confrontation on the main deck. A challenge thrown down. A cutlass drawn in defiance. The air is suddenly charged, static with unspoken threats. One moment, everyone is going about their duties. The next, a shout, a clash of steel, and the ship is plunged into civil war. You are caught in the middle. Do you side with the captain, knowing he might be doomed but fearing the wrath of the mutineers? Or do you join the uprising, hoping for a better share of the spoils but risking summary execution if the mutiny fails? This isn't a battle against an outside enemy. These are the men you've eaten with, shared rum with, perhaps even saved in a previous skirmish. Now, they are your potential executioners. If you side with the captain and the mutiny succeeds, your fate is grim. The mutineers, having just taken control through violence, are in no mood for mercy. You might be forced to walk the plank, a theatrical but terrifying end. You stand on the edge of the ship, the cold, dark water churning below, the jeers of your former comrades ringing in your ears. One step, and you plunge into the depths, your hands perhaps bound, your body quickly swallowed by the sea. Or perhaps a more immediate, less ceremonial end. A musket ball to the head, a cutlass thrust through your gut, your body unceremoniously tossed overboard to save time. A common historical anecdote, often cited in pirate lore, tells of captains being marooned on deserted islands. A slow, agonizing death by thirst and starvation, highlighting the brutal nature of internal power struggles. Even if you're spared immediate execution, your life could still be a living hell. You might be demoted to the lowest, most dangerous tasks, constantly watched, constantly abused, knowing that any mistake, any sign of disloyalty, could trigger a brutal reprisal. Your food might be withheld, your sleep constantly interrupted. It's a slow, psychological torture, making you wish for the swift oblivion of the plank. If you join the mutiny and it fails, your situation is equally, if not more, dire. The captain, having crushed the rebellion, will be merciless. He needs to reassert his authority, to make an example. You might be flogged to within an inch of your life, your back a bloody pulp, left to suffer and likely die from infection in the ship's squalid hold. Or, for the ringleaders and their perceived close associates, the punishment is often more severe. You could be strung up from the yardarm, a public execution designed to instill terror and obedience. Imagine the noose around your neck, the sudden drop, the brief, agonizing struggle for breath as your life is choked out of you, your body swaying grotesquely in the wind as a grim warning to the rest of the crew. This swift, public hanging was a common method of dealing with insubordination, a terrifying spectacle meant to reinforce the captain's absolute power. There's also the subtle, yet pervasive, danger of being perceived as a threat after a successful mutiny. Even if you helped depose the old captain, the new regime might view you with suspicion, especially if you were vocal or prominent in the uprising. You might suddenly find yourself embroiled in a new, internal power struggle, another faction vying for control. This constant political maneuvering, the need to assess loyalties and navigate treacherous alliances, adds another layer of mental strain to the already brutal physical realities of pirate life. You have to be constantly vigilant, watching not just for enemy ships, but for the glint in a shipmate's eye. The irony is that piracy, meant to be a life of freedom, often devolved into a microcosm of the very tyranny sailors sought to escape. The struggle for power, the inherent distrust, and the brutal consequences of internal conflict meant that a pirate's greatest fear could often be the man sleeping in the hammock next to him. You might dream of riches, of freedom, but the cold reality is that a whisper, a misstep, or a wrong choice in a power struggle could easily lead to your terrible, unceremonious end, not at the hands of a king's navy, but from the sharpened edge of your own crew's betrayal. You've somehow, against all odds, managed to navigate the internal politics of the ship, sidestepping mutiny and surviving the volatile tempers of your shipmates. Perhaps you even tasted the fleeting joy of a successful plunder. But even the most successful pirates eventually need to make landfall, to resupply, to spend their ill-gotten gains. And here, in the supposedly safe haven of a port, a whole new host of dangers emerge. Shore leave's dangers are a different kind of peril, less about immediate violence and more about a slow, insidious consumption, or a sudden brutal end in the murky depths of human depravity. Imagine the euphoria as the ship finally drops anchor in a bustling port. The long weeks, perhaps months, at sea have taken their toll. The stale air, the cramped quarters, the endless horizon, all replaced by the cacophony of a vibrant waterfront. The smells hit you first: fresh bread, spices, the cloying sweetness of exotic fruits, mingling with the familiar stench of fish and human waste. You step onto solid ground, your legs still accustomed to the sway of the ship, feeling oddly unsteady. The promise of fresh food, clean water, and most importantly, rum and women, fills the air. But this is no paradise. The first danger you encounter is often the simplest disease. These port towns, particularly in the tropical climes where pirates often sought refuge, were breeding grounds for pathogens. Remember the diseases you narrowly avoided just getting to the ship in the first place. They're back, and they're stronger. Yellow fever, carried by mosquitoes, could sweep through a crew like wildfire, leaving men writhing in fever, vomiting black bile, their skin turning a sickly yellow before death claimed them. Malaria, another mosquito-borne scourge, would bring on fits of shaking chills and burning fevers, weakening you, making you susceptible to other infections, and often leading to a slow, debilitating demise. Dysentery, spread through contaminated food and water, would leave you racked with cramps and relentless diarrhea, dehydrating you until your body simply gave out. You might spend your precious shore leave not reveling in debauchery, but lying in a filthy cot in a seedy tavern, slowly wasting away, your dreams of future adventures dissolving into a feverish haze. Then there's the rum. Oh, the rum. After weeks or months of the watered-down rations on board, the potent, undiluted liquor available on shore is a siren song. You drink deeply, quickly, letting the burning liquid wash away the memories of hardship, the fear of death. But with every glass, your judgment clouds, your defenses drop. You become easy prey. You might find yourself in a bar fight, a drunken brawl over a woman, a perceived insult, or simply for the sheer enjoyment of it. A cracked bottle over the head, a hidden knife slipped between your ribs. These are common ends for a pirate on a drunken spree. No glorious battle, no daring escape. Just a sordid, ignominious death in a dark alley, your pockets emptied, your body left for the scavengers. This kind of casual, drunken violence was a tragically common historical reality for sailors on shore leave. And speaking of empty pockets, theft and robbery are rampant. You're a pirate, supposedly the one doing the plundering. But in a port, you become the mark. The waterfront is crawling with cutthroats, con artists, and desperate souls far more adept at fleecing a gullible sailor than you are. You might wake up in the morning, head pounding, stomach churning, to find your hard-earned share of the plunder gone, leaving you destitute and stranded. Or worse, you might resist a robbery attempt and find yourself with a blade in your back, your life draining away onto the cobblestones. There's a particular irony in a pirate being robbed, a grim reversal of fortune that highlights the pervasive lawlessness of these places. Then there's the allure of women, or rather, the danger they sometimes represented. Prostitution was rife in port towns, and with it came the terrifying specter of venereal diseases. Syphilis and gonorrhea were rampant, devastating illnesses in an era without antibiotics. Syphilis, in particular, could lead to a slow, agonizing death, progressing through horrific stages, initially painful sores, then rashes, followed by neurological deterioration, blindness, madness, and eventually, a gruesome demise. Imagine the terror of feeling your body slowly decaying, your mind unraveling, knowing it was the price of a fleeting moment of pleasure. Historians still debate the true impact of venereal disease on the overall health and mortality of pirate crews, but its devastating individual effects are well documented. Beyond the immediate physical dangers, there's the ever-present threat of being recognized or betrayed. You're a wanted man, after all. And bounties on pirates are tempting incentives. A disgruntled tavern keeper, a jealous rival, or even a fellow pirate with a grudge could easily sell you out to the authorities for a few pieces of gold. One moment you're enjoying a pint, the next, the heavy hand of a marine or a privateer's guard is on your shoulder, dragging you away to face justice. We'll discuss the gallows in more detail later, but the beginning of that terrible journey often starts here, in the deceptive comfort of a port. Finally, there's the danger of simply getting press-ganged back into service, often into the very naval forces you've spent your life evading. Drunken, vulnerable sailors were easy targets for press gangs, who would abduct them and force them into military service. You might wake up on a king's ship, shackled and bound for a long, brutal tour. Your pirate days abruptly and forcibly ended. While not a direct death, it was certainly a death of your freedom. A far worse fate for many pirates than a quick end. So, while shore leave promised respite and revelry, it often delivered a different kind of terror. The bustling energy, the vibrant sights and sounds were merely a thin veil over a cesspool of disease, violence, and betrayal. You might have survived the high seas and desperate battles, only to succumb to a fever in a dank room, a knife in your back from a petty thief, or the lingering, agonizing death brought on by a disease contracted in a moment of weakness. The pirate who lived by the sword often didn't die by it. He died in a forgotten alley, his pockets empty, his body consumed by the unseen perils of the very ports he once plundered. You've been incredibly fortunate, a true survivor. You've outrun disease, navigated treacherous waters, faced down enemy ships, endured the horrors of primitive medicine, and even avoided the blade of a mutineer or the perils of a drunken shore leave. But for many pirates, the most terrifying fate of all wasn't on the open sea or in a squalid port, but at the end of a rope. This is the grim shadow of the gallows, the ultimate consequence for a life of lawlessness. A public, humiliating, and often slow death designed to be a chilling spectacle. Imagine the moment of capture. It might be a cunning trap laid by a Royal Navy warship, its superior firepower overwhelming your vessel. Or perhaps a tip-off from a disgruntled former shipmate led to a surprise raid while your crew was carousing on shore. The fight, if there is one, is short and brutal. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. The cold gleam of musket barrels, the glint of bayonets, the stern faces of hardened marines, It's a terrifying reversal of fortune. You are no longer the hunter, you are the hunted, and your capture marks the beginning of your end. The journey to trial is often an ordeal in itself. You might be shackled in irons, crammed into the stifling hold of a naval vessel, subjected to harsh conditions, meager rations, and the constant psychological torment of knowing your fate is sealed. The days stretch into weeks, each one bringing you closer to the inevitable. The fear is a constant companion, gnawing at your insides. The trial itself, if you even get one, is rarely fair. You are a pirate, a notorious enemy of the state, a public menace. The courts are often rigged, the judges biased, and the evidence against you overwhelming. Your past deeds, real or imagined, are paraded before a horrified public. There's no chance for acquittal, no plea of innocence that will be heard. The verdict is almost a foregone conclusion, delivered with stern gravity, guilty. And then comes the sentence, spoken with a chilling finality, to be hanged by the neck until you are dead. The words echo in the silence of the courtroom, sealing your doom. But the gallows isn't just about ending a life. It's about making a statement. Public executions were a common historical fact in the 17th and 18th centuries, designed as a grim deterrent, a visceral warning to anyone contemplating a life of crime. Your execution won't be a quiet affair. You'll be paraded through the streets, perhaps in an open cart, to the execution site. Crowds will gather, some jeering, some morbidly curious, some perhaps even sympathetic. The air will be thick with the buzz of onlookers. A morbid carnival atmosphere. You'll smell the sawdust, hear the creak of the gallows timbers, and feel the cold wind on your face as you approach your final stage. The gallows itself is a terrifying sight, a wooden structure, stark against the sky, with a dangling noose. You are led up the steps, your legs heavy, your heart pounding a drum against your ribs. The hangman, often a gruff, imposing figure, adjusts the noose around your neck. It's a coarse, rough rope, chafing against your skin. You feel the knot tighten, the pressure against your windpipe. Your hands might be bound behind your back, your feet shackled. You are utterly helpless, at the mercy of the hangman and the silent crowd below. The drop itself is the moment of truth. If the hangman is skilled, and the drop is sufficient, your neck might break instantly, leading to a swift, though still terrifying, end. But more often than not, particularly with crude gallows and less experienced hangmen, the drop is insufficient. Instead of a broken neck, you suffer a slow, agonizing death by strangulation. Imagine the sensation, the sudden jerk, the pressure on your throat, cutting off your air. Your lungs burn, screaming for oxygen. Your vision might swim, red at the edges, then black. You struggle, instinctively clawing at the rope, your limbs twitching in a desperate, futile dance. The crowd watches, a macabre spectacle. Your face turns purple, your eyes bulge. It's a slow, agonizing suffocation. Every second an eternity of pain and terror as your brain is deprived of air. This protracted death, rather than a swift neck break, was a distressingly common occurrence. Historians still debate the precise proportion of such long drops versus short drops and their impact on execution methods. Sometimes, to make the lesson even more stark, the body of an executed pirate would be left hanging in chains in a prominent location, often on the waterfront, or perhaps in a gibbet, a cage designed to hold a rotting corpse. This was done to serve as a constant, horrifying warning to other sailors and potential criminals. Imagine your body, slowly decaying, picked apart by carrion birds, swaying in the wind for weeks, even months. The elements would strip your flesh, leaving your bones exposed, a grotesque sculpture of justice. Even in death, there would be no peace, no dignity. The psychological toll of facing the gallows is immense. The days and hours leading up to it are filled with an unbearable dread, a chilling certainty of your impending doom. You might reflect on your life, your choices, the fleeting moments of adventure, and the lasting consequences of your actions. The fear of the unknown, combined with the certainty of a public, humiliating death, would be a torment far worse than any physical pain. So, while you might have dreamed of dying with a cutlass in your hand, fighting bravely on the deck of your ship, the cold reality for many pirates was a far less romantic end. It was the gallows, a public spectacle of punishment, a brutal reminder that even a life of freedom eventually comes with a terrible, final price. You would die not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale. Your last moments filled with the terror of the noose, your final resting place, a nameless hole or a rotting display, your memory serving only as a grim warning. You've cheated the grave more times than any sane person could count scurvy, cannon fire, even the hangman's noose. You're a ghost among the living, a survivor of unimaginable odds. But the sea, in its vast, indifferent power, still holds one of its most terrifying cards, the shipwreck. This isn't just about a hole in the hull, it's about the ship. Your floating home, turning into your tomb. A chaotic, brutal struggle against the elements where salvation is a fleeting whisper and death is a certainty. Imagine the weather turns, not just a squall, but a true tempest. A churning maelstrom of wind and water that makes the earlier storms seem like mere ripples. The sky darkens to an unnatural, bruised purple, and the waves rise like liquid mountains, towering over your mast, crashing down with incredible force. The ship, which once felt so sturdy, now becomes a tiny toy, tossed, spun, and slammed against the unforgiving ocean. The roar of the wind is deafening, a constant, high-pitched shriek that tears through the rigging. The timbers groan and shriek, sounding like a living creature in agony, threatening to rip apart at any moment. Then comes the moment of impact. Perhaps the ship is driven onto a jagged, submerged reef, or slammed against a rocky coastline. The sound is horrifying, a tearing, splintering shriek of wood, a sickening lurch that throws you from your feet. The ship shudders violently, a shudder that goes through your very bones. Water rushes in, cold and dark, pouring through the gaping wounds in the hull. You hear the shouts of your shipmates, quickly turning into screams as chaos erupts. Panic becomes a physical entity, a wave washing over the deck. Men scramble, desperate to save themselves, to find a way out. But there's no escape below deck if you're caught in the hold or in your cramped hammock. The water rises with terrifying speed. You can feel the chilling current swirling around your ankles, then your knees, pulling you down into the dark, watery abyss. The air is thick with the smell of wet wood, fear, and the metallic tang of blood as men are crushed by shifting cargo or splintering beams. You might be trapped, pinned by falling debris, the rising water slowly, inexorably, claiming you. The last thing you'd see is the churning, dark water, rising higher and higher until it engulfs you completely. If you make it to the deck, the situation is hardly better. The ship is breaking apart around you. Masts snap and crash down, threatening to crush anyone beneath them. The deck itself splinters and buckles, threatening to give way beneath your feet. Waves, massive and relentless, sweep across the deck, washing men overboard with terrifying ease. You might find yourself clinging to a rope, fighting against the incredible force of the water, watching as your shipmates are torn from their grasp and swept into the boiling ocean. It's a terrifying, visceral struggle for survival, made all the more desperate by the knowledge that the ship, your only sanctuary, is now actively trying to kill you. A common historical fact often overlooked is that shipwrecks were by far the leading cause of maritime deaths, dwarfing combat and even disease for centuries. And even if you manage to avoid being crushed or swept away, the subsequent struggle is agonizing. You might find yourself in the water, clinging to a piece of floating wreckage, a splintered spar, a broken barrel, a door ripped from its hinges. The water is freezing, constantly threatening to drag you under. You are miles from any land, adrift in an indifferent ocean. Hypothermia sets in quickly, numbing your limbs, clouding your mind. You shiver uncontrollably, your teeth chattering, but the cold permeates your very core. Your muscles cramp, making it impossible to hold on. Then comes the thirst. The salt water, ironically, only intensifies your dehydration. Your lips crack, your tongue swells, your throat becomes raw and burning. You might be driven to drink the seawater, a desperate act that only hastens your demise, leading to further dehydration, delirium, and eventually kidney failure. Your mind, already strained by exhaustion and terror, begins to play tricks on you. You might hallucinate, seeing distant land that isn't there, or hearing the voices of loved ones long lost. These are the cruelest torments, offering false hope before snatching it away. The sun, if it appears, becomes another tormentor, baking down on your exposed skin, raising painful blisters. Your skin peels. Your eyes become bloodshot and swollen. You are exposed to the elements, utterly vulnerable. A tiny speck in an endless, merciless blue. The feeling of utter isolation, of being completely alone in the vastness of the ocean, is a profound psychological torture. Historians often debate the psychological endurance required for survival in such dire circumstances, highlighting the fine line between hope and despair. And of course, the ever-present threat of sharks. Drawn by the commotion, the scent of any blood in the water, they are silent, dark shapes circling below, waiting. You might feel a bump, a brush, or see the terrifying flash of a fin, knowing that your struggle against the elements is about to be interrupted by a sudden, brutal attack. Your final moments might be filled with searing pain as a powerful jaw clamps down, tearing your flesh, pulling you beneath the waves. Your death by shipwreck is rarely quick or clean. It is a prolonged, agonizing fight against overwhelming odds, a slow surrender to the elements. You drown. You freeze. You die of thirst. You are taken by predators, or you simply succumb to exhaustion. Your body giving up the fight. Your final resting place is the seabed, your bones scattered among the wreckage of your ship, an unmarked grave swallowed by the vast, dark ocean. There's no glory in such an end. No heroic last stand, just the cold, crushing indifference of the sea claiming another victim, erasing your story from the world as if you never existed. You've stared down death in its myriad forms, a true enigma of the pirate world. Scurvy, shipwrecks, combat, even the gallows, you've somehow emerged, battered but still breathing. But for most pirates, the final, inescapable truth was simpler, more desolate than any dramatic demise. It was the unmarked grave, the anonymous end that awaited the vast majority. Their stories lost to the waves, forgotten on distant shores, or buried in unmarked earth. A silent testament to a life lived outside the bounds of history. Imagine, for a moment, that you survive a battle, a storm, a bout of fever. You don't die spectacularly. Instead, your end is a slow fade. Perhaps you're wounded, not fatally, but grievously. A festering injury that never truly heals, leaving you weak, vulnerable, a constant drain on the dwindling resources of the ship. You can no longer haul ropes, no longer fight. You become a burden, an extra mouth to feed. And in the harsh realities of pirate life, burdens are rarely tolerated for long. You might be left behind at the next uninhabited island, given a small cask of water and a few biscuits, a cruel form of marooning, not for punishment, but simply because you are no longer useful. You watch the ship sail away, a shrinking speck on the horizon, leaving you utterly alone to face the slow, agonizing end by thirst, hunger, or the unseen predators of the island. Or perhaps your ship itself simply disappears. A sudden, violent storm in the dead of night. A hidden reef in uncharted waters. The ship is swallowed whole by the ocean, leaving no trace, no survivors. Your demise is instantaneous. Your grave the entire, vast seabed. No one knows what happened. No distress signals. No wreckage found. You and your entire crew simply vanish, becoming another whispered legend among the few who remember your name. This silent, complete disappearance was a common fate for ships in an era without modern communication or sophisticated navigation. Even if you died on board, a more common scenario than the romanticized battle deaths, your burial would be perfunctory, wrapped in a piece of sailcloth, perhaps with a heavy shot tied to your feet. You'd be slid over the side with a brief, mumbled prayer, or no prayer at all. Your body sinks into the cold depths, joining countless others who met the same fate. The ocean is a vast, unfeeling cemetery, and your resting place is utterly anonymous, unmarked by headstone or monument. Your memory would quickly fade from the minds of your rough shipmates, replaced by the next immediate concern, the next prize, the next storm. For those who died on shore, their end was often just as ignominious. A common historical fact is that many pirates died in their sleep in port towns, not from violence, but from the cumulative toll of disease, malnutrition, and a lifetime of hard living. No one would record your passing. Your name wouldn't be carved onto a stone. You might be buried in a shallow, unmarked grave on a deserted beach, or tossed into a common pit with other forgotten souls. Your body would nourish the anonymous earth, your existence merely a fleeting blip in the vast tapestry of history. The very nature of piracy, a life lived outside the law and beyond the reach of official records, meant that most pirates simply vanished from history. Their stories were rarely written down, their deaths even less so. They left no legacy, no grand monuments, no family to mourn their passing or record their deeds. They were a transient population, drifting from port to port, ship to ship, their lives consumed by the immediate need for survival and plunder. This constant movement, this deliberate anonymity, ensured that their ends were often just as anonymous. The lack of personal connection contributed to this anonymity. Piracy attracted desperate men, often those who had severed ties with their past lives, fleeing debts, injustice, or simply seeking a different path. They left no forwarding address, no family waiting anxiously for news. When they died, whether by disease, violence, or the indifference of the sea, there was simply no one left to care, no one left to remember. This absence of formal record-keeping and personal ties led to the vast majority of pirates simply disappearing without a trace. A profound historical truth that contrasts sharply with romanticized tales. So, while tales might speak of daring escapes and glorious last stands, the quiet truth for most pirates was a death far less dramatic. It was an end swallowed by the vastness of the ocean, or simply forgotten on a sun-baked shore. Your final resting place is just a whisper in the wind, a silent space in the vast, unwritten history of the high seas. There's no headstone, no epitaph, just the chilling realization that your life, lived on the fringes of society, would ultimately end with no one to mark your passing, no one to tell your story. It's the ultimate anonymity, a final erasure that makes even the most terrible ways of dying seem, perhaps, a little less lonely.